So the first grouping is clarifying, sharing, and understanding learning intentions. Possibly the most widely implemented and the least well done of all the strategies. In many districts now, there is a policy that there must be a learning objective or a learning intention for every lesson, written by the teacher up on the board, copied by the students into their notebooks, and subsequently ignored for the rest of the lesson. I asked a student the other day, what is a learning intention? He said, it's what we copy into our notebooks at the beginning of our lessons when we're talking to our friends. Now, of course, students do need to know where they're learning. I'm personally embarrassed by how much time I spend teaching students without actually telling them where we're going. And it's kind of obvious, really, isn't it? If the students know where we're headed, we have more chance of arriving at the destination. As Yogi Berra once said, if you don't know where you're going, you might end up someplace else. So, of course, students should know where they're going. But it's a mistake to think that the best way to do this is always with a learning intention given at the start of the lesson, for at least 3 reasons. Sometimes you don't know. Sometimes, of course, you do know. If you're teaching high school students to balance chemical equations, then your goal is to get every single student to the same point. And if a student is heading off in a different direction, you say, no, that's incorrect, you need to do it this way. But if you're getting students to react to a poem by Emily Dickinson, it's okay if students in one table head off in one direction and students on another table head off in a completely different direction. It's okay if different students learn different things. Sometimes a student may seem to have completely misunderstood the idea and is heading off in a direction that you don't think is very smart. And you go and talk to them and you just find out they're being more creative in addressing the task that you gave them than you give them credit for. So sometimes you know where the students are going, sometimes you don't. And I would also say that sometimes you don't even have preset outcomes. All you know is this activity is valuable, you tried it with many students in the past, and it's always resulted in powerful learning, even though it's impossible to predict exactly what kind of learning for what particular students at any particular time. So sometimes you don't know. Sometimes telling the students where you're going spoils the journey. If I give students a task where the key insight is realizing that triangles that have the same base and the same height actually have the same area, then if I tell the students we're doing problems involving areas of triangles, I've given it away. What was a rather interesting challenge is now a routine exercise. So telling students where you're going sometimes spoils the journey. And thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, telling every single student where you're going at the beginning of every single lesson is just a recipe for uninspired and uninspiring teaching. I spent thousands of hours doing research in classrooms. And there's one thing that I've learned that I'd like to share with you right now, just in case you haven't figured that out for yourselves yet. And this important truth about classrooms is not all children are motivated. Stunning, isn't it? And yet it's important, you see, because if all our students were motivated, we could post up any old learning objective and we'd get away with it. Because our students would come into our classroom saying, Mr. Wiliam, I'm just desperate to learn something today. I don't care what it is, I just need to learn something. You post up the objective and you say, wonderful, as long as I learn that today, today will be a good day. But that's not the reality that any teacher I know faces. Our students need to be engaged and enthused. And that's the skill of really creative teachers, to take these Common Core state standards and to translate them into exciting, innovative, engaging activities for young people. I saw a lovely example of this in a middle school science classroom. A teacher began the lesson by asking the students, why does it take longer to cook potatoes at 400 degrees in an oven than it does at 212 degrees in a saucepan in boiling water? I thought, what a great question. I had never thought about it that way before. I knew those two facts, but I'd never connected them. But the important point is that teacher had a clear learning objective in mind, and he actually shared it with the students about 20 minutes into the lesson. But he judged that the best way to start the lesson was not with a learning objective. He thought the best way to start the lesson was to engage the students in an interesting and engaging discussion.